tutor, and in today's tutorial it's going to be a continuation of the course INR112, and it's a course on international law. And today we'll be talking about diplomacy. But before we talk about diplomacy, we want to first talk about recognition. With this being said, let's all straight into it. Good evening, Mr. Zubai. It's good to have you on board. Good evening, Mr. Rick. It's also good to have you on board. Okay, let's just go straight into it. So we have INR112. I want to talk about recognition. Now, when we say recognition, what are we talking about? Recognition is a process whereby certain facts are accepted and endowed with a certain legal status, all right, such as statehood, sovereignty over newly acquired territory, or international effect of grant of nationality. Now let's talk about this. Let's break this down into bits. Recognition. Now, speaking of which, let's note the key points in this definition. We have, it's a process, and this process entails, all right, the acceptance, all right, the process that entails all right, that entails the acceptance of certain, okay, just a moment, the acceptance of what? Certain legal statutes. Legal statutes. Now, these statutes, what can we categorize these legal statutes as? What can we categorize these legal recognitions as? Speaking of which, we are talking about the sovereignty, all right? We are talking about statehood, all right, of a newly acquired territory. All right? Statehood of a newly acquired territory, okay, of a newly acquired territory, or what we call grant of nationality. Speaking of which, all right, nationality, if a state or a nation or a people or group of people or a community, or all right, is being granted nationality, then we refer to these as legal recognition under international law. All right, so we have that as that. So we also have what we call diplomatic recognition. Diplomatic recognition here is said to be an act by which one state acknowledges an act or statute of another state or government, thereby according, all right, thereby according it a degree of what? Legitimacy, okay, with the intent to bring into force legal consequences of recognition. Now, it's just like saying that another state giving the accolades or giving the respect that another state exists, probably maybe the shared boundary, or just basically the recognition or the acceptance that here is another legitimate and another sovereign state. Therefore, the state's territory must be respected. The territory in the aspect of air, water, land must be respected, in which if it's not respected, there are what we call consequences of recognition. Okay, that is what we have as diplomatic recognition. Diplomatic recognition. Okay, now it says here that it is an act by which one state acknowledges the act by which one state acknowledges, all right, an act of another state or government, an act or government of another state. So we have that as that. Now let's talk about the types of recognition. Okay, we have the factor recognition. Okay, the factor recognition, and we have the jaw recognition. Okay, the types, we have the factor recognition, and we have the jaw recognition. Okay, factor recognition and the jaw recognition. So we have that as that. Now let's move forward a little bit. Now, like I made mention earlier, when we talk about territory, all right, there are certain things that another state must acknowledge or respect when it comes to relating with another state. Now, a state must always respect the territory, and this territory comprises of what we call land, air, and sea. A sovereign state has power as sovereignty. The sovereignty of a sovereign state covers both the land, the sea, and the air of such territory or such state, and anyone that infringe or anyone that wants to come into this space must have the approval of such a state. That is recognition. Okay, so we have that as that. Now let's move forward a little bit. Now we have here, now let's talk about the topic for tonight, which is diplomacy, understanding diplomacy. Now, when we talk about understanding diplomacy, what are we talking about? Now, understanding diplomacy is a concept. Okay, diplomacy is a what? A concept. As long as, now, diplomacy as a concept has a long history and is yet to what? Dissipate in relevance or currency. Now, diplomacy or peaceful management. Diplomacy or the peaceful management of what? International relation is an ancient and vital field of human endeavor which has always tended to be, all right, shrouded in, all right, in secrecy. Now, the meaning in this essence is that now diplomacy in international affairs is surrounded by what we call dualist controversy, subjected or subjective view of its goodness and badness. Now, diplomacy in this means that the method through which a state conducts its business with others in the system. Method of diplomacy conduct via what we call bilateral and multilateral diplomacy. Now, the point we need to note here is that when it comes to diplomacy in international relations or international affairs, it is said to be the method through which, okay, the method through which a state conducts its business. A state conducts its business. Okay, the method through which a state conducts its business with others in the system. With others in the system. So we have that as that. All right, and we have the type of diplomacy. Let's let me teach you this because we can see that we have bilateral, multilateral. Okay, we have the bilateral, okay, we have the bilateral, lateral and multi, okay, bilateral and multilateral. I think it's not really necessary. Bilateral and what we call multilateral. So we have that as that. Now let's continue. Now let's talk about some other types of diplomacy, as we have the likes of summit diplomacy. When we say summit diplomacy, what are we talking about? Summit diplomacy involves, all right, it is the form of negotiation where major actors are the leaders of respective country. Okay, that's the summit. Major leaders of a country. Here, the major leader of the country are foreigners. So we have the parliamentary diplomacy. This is most multilateral in nature. That's parliamentary diplomacy. All right, parliamentary diplomacy. Here we have most multilateral, the most multilateral in what? In nature. The most multilateral in nature. And here we have deliberations are governed by rules. All right, this is where we have deliberations governed by rules resembling a typical national parliament. Activities such as debates, all right, actions on drafts, elections of official determinants of budgets, everything goes on through, all right, the parliamentary diplomacy. So we have that as that. So we talk about the techniques used in diplomacy. We have the likes of negotiation. The techniques. We have the likes of negotiation. Okay, we have the likes of persuasion. Negotiation, we have persuasion. Okay, we have propaganda. All right, we have propaganda. Okay, we have lots of propaganda, and we have mediation and conciliation. Mediation and conciliation. We won't talk about negotiation. You know, this is not new to us. Okay, it involves the discussion among sovereign nations. All right, discussion. All right, discussion among sovereign nations. Okay, the discussion among sovereign nations on particular issues. When we say persuasion, and we are simply talking about another basic technique of diplomacy. It's called persuasion. It is an act of persuading or eliciting desired response. All right, eliciting desired response. Okay, persuading or eliciting desired response. So we have propaganda. It is the deliberate manipulation of symbols with the purpose of affecting men's idea. All right, deliberate manipulation. All right, of symbols, words, what view. Okay, deliberate. That's deliberate, not like it's deliberate manipulations of. All right, deliberate manipulations of what we call symbols for the purpose of affecting men's attitude and behavior in a particular way. And when we talk about mediation, we're talking about when nations cannot achieve or reach an agreement through their own resources, so they need to bring in a third party. Okay, so we have that as that. And lastly, for tonight's class, we have what we call code, all right, coercion, whereby it is one of the forceful acts which does not involve physical violence. Okay, it is one of the forceful acts which does not involve physical violence, but institutes to get cooperation with other parties involved. All right, so we have that as that. So in our next class, we'll be talking about who a diplomat is, and that should be it on INR112. All right, thank you very much, everyone. I believe you'll be able to gain a thing or two in today's class. Please, let's do all to keep our notes up to it and tell them to their appropriate quarters. I look forward to seeing you all in subsequent tutorials. To have a wonderful evening. Bye.